So now we're in August. What do the words back to school mean to you? Does it elicit some kind of hive reaction? Does it make you feel excited that the kids are going back to school and they'll be on some kind of routine? What does it feel like for you? And recognize, what does it feel like for you as a parent now versus when you were a kid? Personally, I always loved the back to school part because I loved the new stationery and the pens and pencils and getting that all ready for my backpack and getting to school. Like that was super exciting for me. As a parent now, it feels a little different at times, right? So welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Dr. Anjali. I'm the founder of Back in Balance. I'm a non cracking, non popping chiropractor and integrative functional nutrition specialist. I really love helping families feel supported and empowered as they navigate the journey from preconception to postpartum and parenthood and beyond. But today we're going to talk about being a parent, what that looks like potentially for your family as you navigate back to school, as your kids navigate back to school, and how we can potentially make this a little bit smoother for everybody involved. Ready? Let's go. Here are potential signs that back to school may also be stressful for your child and maybe by extension for you, right? Because managing your kids' emotions and their behaviors might create extra stress for you or take an extra toll on your bandwidth. So, one of the first signs, which I think doesn't get talked about nearly often enough, is changes in digestion. So, does your child hold when they need to use the restroom, right? Whether it's for bowel movements or for urination, are they using the restroom at school? We'll talk about that in just a minute in terms of how that plays into the stress picture. Does your child have just an emotional release when you pick them up or when they come home after being really well behaved all day long and they come home? Is it just this release of all the things that you get to hear about and be on the receiving end of? And then the third sign might be this just constant low grade illness or just not feeling good, right? Like just catching all the things. And yes, age can be a part of it, right? If they're younger kids going into daycare or preschool, yes, they might be getting exposed to new germs, more germs and dealing with that. But does your child tend to like just have to be home all the time or just always dealing with a runny nose or some kind of sinus congestion or cold symptom like that, right? So let's talk about why that matters or how that plays into stress, and more importantly, then what we can do about it to restore a little bit more balance. So when it comes to our health, if you've heard me talk before, you've probably heard me say this in some capacity before as well. But when it comes to our health, there are multiple facets that impact our health. And when it comes to stress, there are multiple aspects that we'll respond to in a stressful way, right? What I mean by that is that there are largely three categories of stress that impact our health and our day to day well being. So, first, in my world as a chiropractor, I would say it's structure or physical stress. How well are you moving? Are you moving? Are you sitting all day long, right? Or what does that look like for you and your child? And then the second is the function. So we have nerves that go to every tissue in our body, and that information is going from our body to our brain and our brain to our body, right? 80% of it is our body to our brain. So, what kind of function do we have in our organs? And that's not just nutritional function, but that's function of all the tissues. Nutrition is a big part of it. We'll talk about that. And then lastly is what we typically think of when we hear the word stress, which is the mental or emotional component of stress and how that impacts our well-being. I'll give you an example of my older daughter who is going to be starting second grade soon. But when she started kindergarten, she would be really well behaved all day long, no problems. Teacher said she was doing great. But then I pick her up and there'd be days when it was just this like emotional meltdown, right? And I pick her up and like, what just happened? Right? Everything was going fine. And then being in the world of health, I said, okay, did you eat your lunch? And then she would say, oh, I didn't have time to eat lunch because we were playing or whatever. She would say, I didn't have time to eat my lunch. So we had to start making sure that she was actually eating her food, not because she didn't like it or anything, but because she was so excited to play with her friends that she didn't wanna spend the time eating her food, or she would just eat a really small portion of it. So to help regulate her blood sugar levels, we had to start making sure that she was actually eating when there was designated time to eat, and that she was eating her snacks when it was snack time, and taking care of all that. And so when we started to do that, we started to notice that she was also starting to improve the frequency of which she was using the restroom at school, because rather than feeling like she needed to hold it and get home, and then that was kind of her sort of safe zone or her comfort zone, that it started to become that her nervous system was getting better regulated, where she could actually feel comfortable using the restroom at school as well. So that's why I look at, is your child using the restroom at school, right? And there can be, even as adults, we can feel like, oh, we don't want to use a public restroom or something. There is definitely components around that. But we're talking about a daily habit that is now starting to form where maybe the child will not use a restroom. But it is still may not be that the child is using the restroom to have a bowel movement at school, but are they having a bowel movement in the morning or in the afternoon or evening when they come home? Ideally, you would have a bowel movement for every meal that you eat. So if your child is having multiple meals in a day, ideally having at least one, but ideally 2 to 3 bowel movements a day for ideal gut function. So that's what you can check for sign number 1. Sign number 2, right, that emotional release or outburst. And a lot of times it's because they've been listening to the teachers, following the rules, not wanting to cry in front of their friends and or anything like that, and so they're paying attention and doing all the things like they're supposed to, and then they come home, and then it's that zone of safety again. But having protein to rest and repair the tissues can be really, really helpful. So making sure that your child is getting adequate protein in the morning. I know it can get really hectic to run out the door and get the kids out to school on time and things like that. But having protein before they get to school and in their lunch if possible, and then in their next meal, if that's an after school snack or dinner, whatever that looks like for your day. But having adequate protein can really help with blood sugar regulation so that they don't have such highs and lows in their energy. So that would be another thing I would suggest. And then when it comes to that low grade, just feeling run down, right? Have you ever had the experience that, let's say you were studying for an exam or you had a big presentation or there was some major deadline that you were working towards and your body's just go, go, go. And then you have a break or vacation or something happens and like you get a little bit of downtime and then suddenly you don't feel good, right? That's when your body says, okay, now you really need to rest and recuperate. So I'm going to force you to do that. And that can happen for our kids as well. So if they tend to get a lot of colds and things, that could be an indication that their nervous system is a little dysregulated. So let's talk about some steps in how to improve that. The first one would be to, besides the having the protein in the breakfast, would be to also have a really simple morning and evening routine, right? So that can be like depending on what your family schedule looks like. It could be you brush your teeth, you eat your breakfast, you grab your backpack or your school bag and your bottle of water or whatever that looks like, and you have this routine. But in addition to that, it could even look like, let's take a breath together. Let's do a breathing exercise for 30 seconds or 1 minute. And the kids will start to emulate what you exemplify as well, right? So we'll do a breathing exercise in just a second. And then the next step that you could do would be to also incorporate a evening routine, right? So when you come home or when you're getting ready for bed, what does that look like? So if you are talking about your day, if you had something that didn't happen as you would have liked it to, then what does that look like? And let's again maybe have a breathing minute or a section of the house or the room that is like, this is your place to come to when you need a little bit of space or quiet time or where you can process your feelings maybe. And then also looking at movement, right? So we talked about structure being one of the key components to our health and well-being. Our bodies were designed for movement. So if there is an activity that you enjoy or that you can do with your kids or depending on the ages of your kids, I would try to find some kind of movement. And We'll have some detailed examples for you in the guide that you can download. But if you would like to start simple, it can even be something like just bouncing on your heels, right? It can re-engage parts of your body, re-engage that lymphatic flow. So one of the things that we do when we feel a lot of pent up energy is we tend to shake it off, right? We physically will move our bodies. So similarly, you can incorporate that into your morning routine or your evening routine. It doesn't have to be very long, just 30 seconds, maybe a minute if you have time, can really help create that kind of flow for yourselves and for your children. Let's walk through a breathing exercise that you can work with your children on, you can do for yourself. It's a box breath. You might be familiar with it, but in case you're not, the way a box breath goes is that you would inhale for 4 seconds. We can do this together. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, and then you hold 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, and hold 2, 3, 4. Depending on how much time you have, you can do that for 30 seconds, which would be 2 reps of that. You can do it for a minute, which is 4 reps of that. Ideally, you would do it until you start to feel your body calm down and feel like, okay, now I'm ready. When you next feel like you're about to lose your patience with your children or your children are at their wits' end, try the box breath. Download the guide below for the family reset. I'd love to hear your favorite routine or hack to making back to school a little less stressful for all of us. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.